Hello, I'm the Dark Master, and welcome back to the Kirby Right Back at You Retrospective. In today's video, we shall be covering Episode 18, Flower Power, or as it's known in the Japanese original, Pink Ball of the Sleeping Forest. Unlike last time, the release of today's episode was relatively uneventful. It was released in Japan on February 2nd, 2002, as the 18th episode, whereas in the United States, it was released on November 2nd, 2002, as the 16th episode. In this episode's case, the reason was due to other episodes being rearranged as opposed to anything to do with the episode in particular. Now let's start with the plot, and it's not very good. The episode opens to a shot of Gengu's convenience store, and right off the bat, we have a change between versions. In the Japanese original, the patrons' conversations were basically incoherent, just background noise. Whereas in the English dub, two actually legible conversations can be heard, with some cappy saying, "Is this really fat-free?" and another saying, "Oh, look at that, it's on sale." It's really just a more annoying background noise, so it is a bit more aggravating than the Japanese original. We see Fololo and the rest of the gang are shopping for supplies for a picnic. Falala asks Kirby if he would like some chocolate bar. Kirby goes and tries to grab it, but Fololo grabs it away, saying they got to save it for the picnic. Tuff then, in a sign of what will be a major issue going forward with the episode, starts acting like an obnoxious brat. In the Japanese original, he says picnics are immature, whereas in the English dub, he simply asks why a picnic is a big deal and says they should just eat now. In an attempt to placate the spoiled brat, Fa says that picnics are fun. In the English dubs, however, she says they're cool. Gotta be hip for the 90s, guys. As she does so, Kirby snatches the chocolate bar back from Fololo. In the Japanese original, he yelps, where in the English dub, he just says, "Hey." The group walks out of the store as we see King Dedede and Escargoon driving down the street with reckless abandon. Rolling up on them, the king then calls to Kirby. He says Kirby's old friend, Noddy, has come to visit him, which is a nod to a previous episode I reviewed called The Pillowcase. And to keep it brief, Noddy is from Kirby's Adventure and makes the transition to the anime really well. I highly recommend you watch that episode as opposed to this one because it's far better than this one. Dedede sicks Noddy on Kirby. The monster popping out of the truck goes to confront the pink puffball. Folo and Fala try to get between the monster and Kirby, but Tuff assures them Kirby can handle Noddy, which, while yes, Noddy is a complete pushover, Tuff's behavior is just pure gaslighting that is quite frankly gross and leads to the plot of this episode. Tuff says all Kirby has to do is suck up the monster. Noddy approaches Kirby, not really doing anything but looking at Kirby's chocolate bar. The two run around for a bit with not oddly fitting music. It's just kind of weird. After a while, Kirby, sick of it all, begins to inhale. In the Japanese original, Dedede is silent, but in the English dub, he says nefariously, "Attaboy." Kirby easily beats the monster as Folo and the others praise him, while Dedede and the Escargoon snicker evilly. We do a close-up of Kirby as he suddenly falls asleep. Tuff and the others go up to him concerned about Kirby. In the Japanese original, they ask, "Are you okay, Kirby?" in unison, whereas in the English dub, they take turns saying this. Also, their footsteps are, for some odd reason, completely removed in the English dub. That's one of those changes that is just so bizarre. The king and Escargoon laugh as they drive off. In the Japanese original, Escargoon sings "Sleep well, sweet child," while in the dub, he says, "Goodbye, Cappy Town, hello, Nappy Town." Just a terrible pun. Then, after that, we cut to Kirby and we have the intro. After the intro, we see Tiff, who, thanks to Falala, is running to Yabui's doctor's office. In the Japanese original, he groans incoherently in surprise when she arrives, whereas in the English dub, he greets her with, "Oh, Tiff, hello." She runs over to Kirby's side and asks Dr. Yabui what is wrong with Kirby, as it seems like he's sleeping, and Fotolo explains that they can't wake Kirby up. Dr. Yabui then explains that Kirby inhaled a noddy and caught sleeping sickness. In the Japanese original, he says Kirby could sleep for 1,000 years, while in the English dub, this is reduced to a more reasonable century at most. Fotolo and Fala say they should have helped Kirby, but remember that Tuff prevented them from helping. Tuff refuses to take responsibility, like a spoiled brat. Shocked, his sister asks for him to confirm this, to which Tuff answers in an indignant manner, saying he thought Kirby could handle it, which, to be fair, Noddy are pathetic, even in the games and in the anime. So it's a reasonable assumption. Tiff then says it's her brother's fault and questions his friendship to Kirby. Tuff asks how he could have known this would have happened. Apparently, this little brat forgot all about the pillowcase episode for some reason. Maybe you could have figured that out, you little twerp, using deductive reasoning. Dr. Yabui then interjects to tell the two to stop fighting, even though one is clearly in the wrong. And to change the subject, Tiff asks if there is a cure. Dr. Yabui explains that there is indeed a cure, the pookie flower, a golden pink blossom that can awaken anyone from even the deepest slumber. In the Japanese original, it goes a step further, with the pookie flower being able to awaken the dead itself. Either that flower smells amazing, or it smells absolutely disgusting. In the English dub, this allusion to death is completely removed, for a pretty reasonable reason, but I still think it's pretty dumb to censor it like that. The doctor says the pookie flower is found in the untamed wilderness of Babagahara, which I assume is somewhere between darkest Africa and Wakanda. After finishing his explanation, Tiff continues the conversation. After her line, Tuff says, "If we have Kirby smell that." He's cut off, though. For some reason, in the English dub, that entire statement was removed. After this, in the Japanese original, C says that the two should forget everything. But this was changed in the dub to saying she'd have to get the flower herself because Tuff is a brat and said he wouldn't go. Even though there's a back and forth, and Tiff runs off to begin the expedition. Tuff is quite the douchebag. As we cut to Tiff on a Polynesian-inspired raft, going on a picnic, clearly lying to her parents in the short roll of the episode. Sir Ibram asks her why Tuff is not going with her, to which Tiff says he has to ask the rude brat himself. Oh, there's also the three Cappy kids, Honey, Iroh, and Spikehead, in non-speaking cameo roles. Tiff sets out on her expedition, rowing down the river. As she does so, Dedede and Escargoon drive by to remind the viewer that they are indeed part of the plot. They mock the girl and drive away. We then see Tuff commandeer the raft from up in a tree. In the Japanese original, when Folo and Falala ask if they could join, he tells them that they can come along if they stay out of his way. And that's interesting. I don't know why they removed that. In the English dub, this line is removed with something that just makes him sound worse, and that he's going to look by himself for the flower to make up to Kirby. This is very bullheaded, and he pushes his sister out of the boat into the water that could easily have alligators in it. Also, she nearly freaking drowns. And no, I'm not kidding. That scene is described as her nearly drowning in official sources. Kind of messed up, almost killing her sister. Despite her trying to convince her brother to help her, he ignores her, and Fololo and Falala and him sail off to find Kirby. I guess they go along with it because they feel guilty for what happened to Kirby. After the trio paddle off, the literally, and I repeat, literally drowning Tiff is saved by none other than Meta Knight with a rope. We then cut to a shot showing Tuff and his crew escorting Kirby on a raft. The camera zooms in on the path ahead by a camera pan of the trees. In the English dub, this camera pan is cut. The camera cuts to Kirby sleeping. There is another pan that was also cut in the English dub that was done in the opposite direction. Tuff has an inner monologue as they get out of the raft where the river grows too narrow to stay on it. As he leads Folo and Fala into the forest, the camera pans as it is revealed that Tiff and Meta Knight are following him. We see the group climbing up a hill then. Noticing that Tuff is struggling to carry the sleeping Kirby, they offer to help him carry Kirby. But like a stubborn mule, Tuff refuses. He pauses to catch his breath. In being nice, Fololo and Fala ask again. Still stubborn, Tuff refuses, and him and Folo fight over Kirby's Sleeping Beauty-esque body that's being held in a basket. This causes Kirby to fall down the hill, and the three go after him. After a bit of searching, They locate him trapped in a giant spider web. We then get a cameo appearance of a Kirby enemy called Como, which debuted in Kirby's Dream Land 3. Never the most interesting enemy until the latest game, where it gave the new spider ability. In the anime, it maintains the three distinct eyes, but is much, much larger and possesses 8 legs to make it a more realistic spider. Overall, a decent cameo. When Como is wrapping Kirby in silk, Tuff asks the unconscious Kirby, "Are you really okay with being a spider's lunch while you sleep?" Which, you little brat, you do know that it's kind of wrong to blame the victim, you sick brat. In the English dub, he screams, "That spider is wrapping Kirby up like a taco," which is a much better reaction. I will give the English dub that. Also, Komo's sound is different between versions. He roars like a kaiju in the Japanese original, but in English dub it hisses more like a actual spider. Tiff is about to interfere, but Meta Knight stops her. Tuff picks up a stick and throws it at the beast. Due to his overconfidence and lack of skill, he misses, but luckily, a stone tossed by Meta Knight does in fact hit the giant spider in the head, which causes it to sulk away. The sound effect of the rock impacting on the spider is changed between versions for I don't know why. The spider also has a groan as it wanders off in the Japanese original, but for some reason it was removed in the English dub. It's another one of those weird little changes. Tuff, under the assumption that he scared the spider away, he calls to Frollo and Fala to brag about his accomplishments. Well, Tiff and Meta Knight talk to each other about Tuff's character. Meta Knight says it's better that Tuff believes in himself right now. I understand what he means to say, but really, no, just no. It's bad parenting. It's apologism for bad childish behavior. Tiff's response to that has changed between versions. In the Japanese original, she correctly says that it doesn't matter if the former calls Tuff's actions a result of courageousness or recklessness, as it doesn't bode well for him due to his lack of caution. In the English dub, she was possessing less faith in her brother and wonders what he'd mess up next, considering that he already messed up a lot. Spoiler alert, he messes up a lot. We see Frollo and Fala take the silk-bound Kirby off the web as Tuff unwinds it all. He snarks that Kirby is still sleeping, to which I question why he's shocked. Frollo and Fala put him back on Tuff's shoulders basket as Tuff makes a ball of silk, keeping his hands busy. What happens next is changed between versions. In the Japanese original, he just gets bored suddenly and throws the silk ball at an active nest, whereas in the English dub, he does it because when Frollo and Fala have skepticism about Tuff's feet, he decides to throw the ball at the nest to prove that he indeed hit the spider. This change turns an honest-to-goodness mistake into an intentional act, which just makes it all the more bad. As one might expect, this makes the nest's inhabitants rather angry, and the swarm chase after the group. In the Japanese original, Frollo and Fala refer to these arthropods that are attacking them as wasps, but in the English dub, they're referred to as bees. Honestly, their design is stylized to the point where it can go either way, and doesn't really matter. Also, we saw these exact bees, or at least the same species, in Hail to the Chief. Little tidbit you might be interested in. The group run away from the stinging insects. Tuff and Kirby fall down a hill into a pool of swampy waters as the other two fly away. The bees swarm around for a bit but go away. Folo and Fala call to him when the bees leave so that he can get out of the water. He sees Kirby floating nearby and goes to pick him up. Suddenly, he begins to sink. In the Japanese original, his struggling consists of confused vocalizations and groans, whereas in English dub, he speaks more coherently when struggling. In the Japanese original, when he sinks, he says he's in a bottomless pit, whereas in the dub, he claims it's quicksand. Before Folo and Fala can help their struggling friend, a lucky tree falls over and lets Tuff save himself and pull Kirby to safety. Of course, the tree falling down was really Meta Knight's doing, as we see him and Tiff are still following the group at a safe distance. We cut to sunset as we see the group prepare to sleep for the night. We then see that Folo and Fala are tending the fire / doing night watch as Tuff sleeps with Kirby, in a scene that is sped up in the English dub for some odd reasons. We then see Meta Knight and Tiff converse on the situation, which is changed between versions. In the Japanese original, Tiff comments on her brother's overconfidence and feels disappointed in his lack of precaution, to which Meta Knight reassures her that this is his only way of not giving up. Tiff comments that his persistence may cause them to give up before he does. In contrast, the English dub has Meta Knight says Tuff's heart in the right place, while Tiff wonders aloud where his brain is. The next morning, in an ironic manner, it is Folo and Falala that are tired, while Tuff is well rested and ahead of them. Of course, the little brat has no sympathy for their reasons, which change between versions. In the Japanese original, they say they were kept up all night because they were doing night watch. However, in the English dub, they explain that Tuff's sleep talking kept them up all night, which makes him even more of an unbearable brat. Tuff stops suddenly, causing the pair to bump into each other when they see the cave in which the pookie flower lives, which looks straight out of Skull Island or some weird, obscure horror movie poster. The three go into the cave as Tiff and Meta Knight arrive shortly thereafterwards. Tiff wonders how the pookie flower can survive without sunlight for photosynthesis and wonders if they should follow. Meta Knight stops her as we hear the group screaming as Tuff and the others run out and a giant cobra is chasing them. For those curious, it's not an enemy from the games. Indeed, Kirby as a series has avoided snake-based regular enemies, or even bosses for that matter. The closest one to this guy being the Deuter Snake, which debuted in Kirby's Return to Dreamland, released well after the anime. The three run away from this mighty serpent, but Tuff trips and is almost eaten until a log is jammed into the serpent's fanged mouths, and what is actually a trap that Meta Knight must have magically generated. I mean, seriously, it's been less than a minute since they heard the snake, which is a bunch of malarkey. And thanks to a rope tied to the log that is also tied to a heavy rock, the snake is sent falling to its presumed death. Kind of sad, really, as that cave was his home and he wasn't really acting in an evil manner. Tuff swings a stick in the air and realizes that the snake is gone. Triumphant, he claims victory. Though when he tells Folo and Falala, they're pretty skeptical, and Tiff is outright aghast at her brother's delusional pride for claiming others' hard work. The camera cuts to the inside of the cavern. It pans along the stalagmites and stalactites that peer into the shot. This panning is shortened in the English dub. There is a scene of the trio walking through the caves horizontally through the tunnel before arriving at the split paths. This was cut from the English dub, likely to fit within English time slots. Kind of missed it, but it does make this terrible episode shorter, so there's that. Tuff asks the pair which way they should go. After a brief period of indecision, they decide to go right. Tuff wonders if they're going the right way when Fala notes a sweet smell that she can smell despite having no nose. They are silently followed by Tiff and Meta Knight. They eventually come to a large chamber with a ceiling hole where they can see none other than the pookie flower dormant. So let's talk a little bit about this monster of the week. It has no voice acting, obviously, only using generic kaiju sounds. Interestingly, the spiny balls on the sides outside of the petals look a great deal like Spike Kirby from Kirby 64. Foreshadowing. And the name Pookie being itself a reference to the effect the bloom has on sleeping is in fact itself a reference to smelling salts, which are used to wake people up, and they smell pretty bad from what I've been told. This is all I have to say on the monster for now, but we'll come back to this later, trust me. The pod opens and reveals its pink/golden bloom. However, when Tuff goes to get the flower to cure Kirby, suddenly several vines with green Venus flytrap heads grab him in what is meant to be an allusion to the Triffids, which are a British sci-fi killer species of plant. Tuff and Kirby are about to be eaten when Meta Knight saves them. I question his decision, but fine. Tiff runs over to her brother, and when asked, she explains to him that they were following him to keep him safe. Meta Knight then explains that this was a trap set by King Dedede. We then cut to a shot of King Dedede and Escargoon. The snail holds a plant encyclopedia. The king comments on how the pookie flower is a seriously bad blossom, explaining to the audience how the flower works. You see, the pookie flower apparently produces these noddies as a sort of spore/berries. When a critter eats them, their owner/friend goes to the flower to wake them up, only for both the owner and the person that was affected by the noddy to be eaten. I have a few problems with this. Firstly, this scene with Dedede really seemed unnecessary, as we do see that Meta Knight is aware of this and overheard the entire explanation Dedede did. So really, he could have explained the whole thing without a flashback to the King Dedede and Escargoon talking about the pookie flower's past victims. Also, can I just say how inefficient the pookie flower's methods of eating are from just a biological perspective? Firstly, it needs a noddy to be eaten, which I assume they're also used for reproduction, so it's a bit inefficient. Second, it requires that the animal to be either domesticated or at the very least have an owner or friend that cares about it. That owner also has to know what is affecting their pet, and they also have to know what the cure is. They have to know where it lives and how they can reach it. And they have to actually be able to, reach it with all the killer giant spiders and giant snakes and quicksand and bees. It just seems like it'd be very inefficient way of capturing prey. Why not just catch insects like a bunch of other carnivorous plants do? Especially since this flower was not explicitly created by enemy, only cultivated as it's implied that there are some off-world individuals. And once Dedede's plot is explained, Tuff reacts. In the Japanese original, the boy outright curses in exasperation over the lengths the king would go to get rid of Kirby. Now, this swearing is obviously removed in the English dub for reasons regarding to being appropriate for children, and is replaced with him being annoyed at the fact that Tiff and Mennonite were following him the whole time. Somehow they made him an objectively worse character than if he had just sworn. How do you do that? Again, he's quite the brat for accusing the two of them of not trusting him, rather than being grateful that they have looked out for his stupid, empty-headed self multiple times. Ignoring their bickering, Mennonite fights the pookie flower and holds up pretty well for a time, much to the cheering of Tiff and Fala. Seeing the Star Warrior's success, Tuff puts Kirby down and walks away. He's stopped by Fololo, Fala, asking where he's going. But then his sister calls him out for the self-pitying, asking if he really did this to help Kirby or just to be a hero, and saying he doesn't even care about his friend. Suddenly, Kirby starts sleep-talking, saying picnic, the last words he spoke to Tuff before this whole adventure started. Sadly, the English dub makes this much quieter to the point of being downright unaudible. We then see that the pookie flower has gotten the upper hand over Mennonite as it's pushed his sword away. Tuff, in a true act of bravery, before going in to help the great Star Warrior, says some truly bizarre ramblings in the Japanese original, in which he comments on Kirby still looking forward to the picnic, saying that those expectations are why he hates children younger than himself. And I am just absolutely aghast that he would even say that. Like, in what context does that make sense? I mean, kind of out of nowhere, even for this wretched episode. In the English dub, for the first time in the entire show, instead, Tuff actually says something that is genuinely nice. Though, to be fair, that's the only time this happens in the entire episode. Into which he may not be a hero, is what he says, but that he can still help one out. He runs over to try and get Meta Knight's sword, but the plan is smart and flings the sword into the ceiling out of reach to the wannabe hero. It captures Tuff, while Tiff, Folo, and Fala can only watch in horror as the Tau are about to be eaten by the vile flower. However, Tuff manages to scoot over and pluck a petal from the pookie flower, which causes it to roar in pain and release Meta Knight. Not skipping a beat, he throws the petal to Tiff, who gives it to Kirby. The pink buff ball awakens and spits out the noddy, which ends up into one of the pookie flower's mouths. Seeing Tuff in danger and hearing Tiff's orders, Kirby begins to suck the flower off. Inhaling these burrs, he then proceeds to turn it to, well, and just watch for yourself. So this is Needle Kirby, who debuts in this episode and perhaps possesses the greatest change/upgrade of the entire anime when it comes to copy abilities. In all games before the anime, Kirby would, instead of getting a hat, change Kirby's appearance, and all it would do is allow Kirby to become a pink spiked ball. In contrast, the anime gives Needle an ability cap, which is in this case a pink helmet with a red visor and a white chin strap, even though he doesn't have a chin. He also gets yellow skin tones and orange feet. The ability itself is also reworked in the show, as Kirby can now launch needles like little missiles and control them. These changes would impact all future appearance of needles. I love the redesign, and it's a real shame Kirby no longer changes his skin tone when he gets abilities. It's quite a shame, but overall this is a great reimagining of the ability, and it's well done in the anime. Still holding his chocolate bar, Kirby cuts the Pookie Flower's vines, which free Tuff and Meta Knight and render the plant weakened. He then commands the needles to pin the protective layers of the flower open. Tuff regains his composure, but there is one vine remaining, and it almost eats him, but Meta Knight saves the brat by setting the flower on fire. Tuff goes over and hugs the forgiving Kirby, who's happy as always. In an attempt to be stern, he says he and Kirby are even because of this. Tiff points out that Meta Knight deserves more recognition, while Tuff acts like a brat and denies this. Meta Knight feeds Tuff's ego by saying he should be proud of what he did, which smooths everything over. Kirby opens the candy bar and finishes it, finally eating it, as he jumps in the air as the episode ends with the Pookie Flower's burning remains in the background. Now let's cover the few positives, many negatives, and my final thoughts on the episode. Firstly, my one non-asterisk positive is Needle Kirby. It was used well in this episode. Also, the redesign is amazing, and it's good that they kept it around for future games. The cameo of Como is also neat, but that's something only Kirby fans will ever notice. Interestingly, there was going to be another enemy cameo meant to appear, the Bat Flapper, which appears unnamed in an early episode. So sorry about not mentioning that when I reviewed Escargoon Squad back then. Though I guess it didn't really matter in that episode either because it went unnamed and was just referred to as Bat. It's quite a shame that Flapper was never seen again. The Pookie Flower is okay with a neat design, but I question how it survives. But now we get into the real negatives. Firstly, Dedede and Escargoon are really underutilized outside of their initial appearance at the start with Gengu's store. I mean, they could have been outright removed with the exception of the first scene that they're in, and that changes pretty much nothing. Maybe it would have been better if they were in the caves and watching Kirby die. That might be a little interesting. Without question, however, the worst aspect of this episode is Tuff. Now, he's always slightly annoying. I would say that he's on average a level of 2 or 3 out of 10 when it comes to annoyingness. But in this episode, they just dial it up to 11. He's the cause of nearly all issues in the plot. He gets Kirby to have the sleeping sickness. He takes credit for what Meta Knight and Tiff do. He's hesitant to help Kirby multiple times. And even when he does, it doesn't really matter because Kirby is a baby and couldn't hold a grudge even if he wanted to. Also, he nearly drowns his bloody sister. I mean, seriously, who does that? And I can't stand Meta Knight's apologism for Tuff's bad behavior. It's just a reflection of the bad parenting of the time. And I've always stated that. And I know where he's coming from, but when it comes to kids, you gotta be a little stern. You have to show some, like, pushback when they do bad things. Otherwise, that just creates bad adults. And there are many, many examples of bad adults on YouTube. Okay, so what are my final thoughts? Well, while I was more positive on this episode than I thought I would be, I would not recommend watching this episode unless you're binging the series as a whole or have already watched all the previous others. It may not be the worst, oh, that's definitely coming up later, but it's definitely second place. I am the Dark Master, and join me next time on the Kirby Right Back at Ya Retrospective.